contingency plans for the use of military in other cities?
We have never and will not illegally deploy troops. All have been under existing and well-established authorities to use troops to support federal law enforcement officers.
Senator Richard Blumenthal delivers a forceful and urgent challenge to Defense Secretary nominee Pete Hegseth, questioning the legality and consequences of deploying active-duty U.S. troops inside American cities. Citing the presence of Marines in Los Angeles and escalating domestic tensions, Blumenthal raises alarms about civil liberties, constitutional limits, and the absence of transparency surrounding contingency plans. The exchange expands into sharp criticism of the Pentagon's vague defense budget, growing drone warfare vulnerabilities, risks to U.S. forces in the Middle East, and delays in releasing critical military aid to Ukraine.
Secretary Hegseth, you've been asked about options for the use of force abroad. I want to ask about the use of our military at home. I have been deeply disturbed and alarmed by the use of active duty troops, Marines, in Los Angeles, and President Trump has made clear his intention to continue to use the military to suppress dissent and likely inflame tensions there and elsewhere, all under the guise of enforcing the law. What he's doing may well be illegal. I want to ask you about contingency plans for the use of active duty military in other cities. Do you have such contingency plans?
Senator, I would just say we share the president's view that, as you characterized it, we are deeply disturbed and alarmed that ICE officers are being attacked while doing their job in any city in America. And so allowing National Guard or active troops under existing authorities to defend them is important.
On ICE officers, yes, but we ought to be equally alarmed by the illegal use of active duty Marines or other military. I take it from your answer that you do have contingency plans for the use of military in other cities.
We have never and will not illegally deploy troops. All have been under existing and well-established authorities to use troops to support federal law enforcement officers.
So far, there's been no legal justification. It's been challenged successfully. I think that it will prevail. Those challenges will prevail in the courts. And I want to ask you right now to submit to this panel those contingency plans for the use of active duty military in other cities. I want to move on to another area of questioning. The chairman has said that you've submitted precious little detail, to quote him, precious little detail about the budget. I think there is no detail. This budget is literally a rough outline with short-sighted shortfalls. For example, the shortfall on the Columbia class, $2 billion. Only about $1 billion for Virginia class. There is virtually no outline or specificity as to how you are going to provide drones to defend and also engage in offensive outline and maneuvers. The nature of warfare is changing right before our eyes in real time. Unmanned aerial and undersea warfare is happening in Ukraine and elsewhere. And I think that you owe this committee and the American public more specificity in that budget, because we will be at risk. We are at risk right now in the Middle East. And I want to know whether we have contingency plans to protect our U.S. personnel in the region from the kind of swarm of drones that have proved devastating already to 3 of our service people in the Middle East on a base in Jordan. Do you have such plans to protect against drones there?
Senator, we work hand in glove with the Joint Staff and CENTCOM and every COCOM, especially right now, to ensure everything at our disposal is available to ensure maximum force protection against any contingency, including the one you described, sir.
Well, I have no assurance that we have the capacity to safeguard against the swarm of small, lightweight, slow-moving drones that are, in my view, our major vulnerability. And right now, if we engage in the Iran conflict would put us and U.S. personnel at risk there. Let me ask you about Ukraine. I've just returned from my 7th trip to Ukraine. I am the advocate, chief sponsor with Senator Graham in the Russia sanctions bill. You said that the United States and the ranking member cited it, that we must start by recognizing that returning to Ukraine's pre-2014 borders is an unrealistic objective and will only prolong the war. My question to you is, when will you release the PDA $4 billion in equipment that Ukraine desperately needs? It's sitting there. Ukraine deserves it. When will it be released?
We're aware of PDA 75, and that is a decision we can make in the future.
My time has expired, but I don't consider that answer adequate.
Thank you, Senator Blumenthal.
Senator Richard Blumenthal's exchange with Pete Hegseth exposes unresolved questions about how far executive power can stretch before it collides with constitutional limits and congressional oversight. The focus was not merely on policy preferences, but on whether clear guardrails exist when the military is considered for domestic use. Blumenthal repeatedly sought confirmation that illegal orders are possible, regardless of who occupies the Oval Office, and that a Secretary of Defense must be prepared to resist them. Hegseth acknowledged the existence of unlawful orders in theory, yet consistently redirected answers away from concrete commitments about how such resistance would occur in practice. The discussion of active duty deployments inside U.S. cities illustrates this tension. Hegseth maintained that all past and future deployments would fall under established legal authorities, yet he declined to provide contingency plans or documentation when requested. That refusal matters. The deployment of Marines or other active forces on American soil is not routine, and the lack of transparency surrounding such plans raises legitimate concerns about decision-making thresholds, civilian protections, and escalation risks. Congressional oversight cannot function effectively when plans are withheld or described only in abstract terms. Blumenthal also highlighted significant gaps in defense preparedness related to unmanned warfare. The senator pointed to real-world consequences, including the deaths of U.S. service members from drone attacks in the Middle East and the increasing use of swarm tactics in modern conflicts. While Hegseth offered assurances of coordination with combatant commands and joint staff, he provided no specific explanation of whether current systems can reliably counter large numbers of low-cost, slow-moving drones. This absence of detail reinforces fears that U.S. defenses remain optimized for earlier forms of warfare, rather than the realities already visible in Ukraine and elsewhere. The questioning further turned to the Pentagon's budget and force protection priorities. Blumenthal criticized the lack of specificity in funding allocations for submarines, drones, and emerging technologies, warning that vague outlines do not translate into operational readiness. Hegseth did not dispute the evolving nature of warfare, but stopped short of explaining how existing shortfalls would be corrected or how quickly improvements could be implemented. In an environment where adversaries are innovating rapidly, delays and ambiguity can translate directly into increased risk for deployed personnel. Ukraine policy added another layer of concern. Blumenthal pressed for clarity on the delayed release of $4 billion in already approved military equipment. Hegseth's response offered no timeline and no justification for why the aid remains undistributed. Given ongoing battlefield pressures and Ukraine's reliance on U.S. support, uncertainty at this scale carries strategic consequences beyond the immediate conflict. It also affects U.S. credibility with allies who are watching whether commitments are honored promptly or deferred indefinitely. Throughout the exchange, Blumenthal's questions underscored a consistent theme. Assurances without specifics are insufficient when constitutional authority, service member safety, and global stability are at stake. Hegseth emphasized legality and loyalty to the chain of command, yet the hearing revealed unanswered questions about transparency, preparedness, and accountability. Those unanswered questions are not procedural details. They define how power is exercised, how risks are managed, and how democratic oversight functions during moments of crisis.